Welcome to this episode of Abide in Me, How Jesus Models Secure Attachment with God. This series is a survey of the Gospel of Mark, looking for how Jesus models what is now called secure attachment, which is the physiological, emotional, cognitive, and spiritual experience of what is often called salvation or regeneration or being conjoined with God or enlightenment, individuation, even becoming spiritual. Through the series, we will discover the benefits of becoming securely attached with God, which is the transformation of one's life into one of joy and satisfaction. So chapter 5 of the Gospel of Mark begins with a story of Jesus again crossing the sea, this time away from Capernaum to the less populated eastern side of the sea. And when they come to shore, they're confronted by this insane man. And he is, in the story, said to be possessed, right? He's out of his mind. He's been running amongst the rocks and cutting himself. And when he and Jesus meet, the man's voice then speaks out and says, "We are legion," right? So it's this story of these demons within are possessing him. And they recognize Jesus to be this presence of love and a divine presence of love, a powerful presence of love. And they say, "Look, don't destroy us, send us away." And Jesus sends them away. And they go into a herd of pigs, and the pigs go crazy and run off the cliff and all die. Here again, I see illustrated the human condition and how becoming securely attached, finding a bond with love, being able to trust love and its presence is healing. Surely you have experienced tension in your life between two competing ideas, right? Do I want chocolate or vanilla? Well, I guess I'll have both. And then a part of you says, well, you ate too much. That was too much sugar, and condemns you for breaking the rule. And then you feel like you've lost again. You're a failure, right? So that's a common thing. It can be deeper, where you are in a job that you hate, but the money's good, but you don't want to love money, but it's security for you and your family and so forth. Or even deeper, the clients that came to me and said, "I love my spouse, but they're toxic. They're anxious, or they're negative, or they're complaining all the time, or they can't be faithful to me. And I see their woundedness, and I really care for them, but I've got to divorce them. I can't be with them." That's a terrible situation to be in. It drives us crazy. And we want to excise it out. We want to get rid of some part of us, and it doesn't work. And then we notice at times some good idea comes along, and a good encouragement to let go of being the need to be. Or can you be silent in that circumstance? Can you not be sarcastic in that circumstance? Because those were the practices you used to resolve the pain, right? To get out of that situation. And it even can be substances. That's maybe why some people drink to excess or do drugs. So what's going on there, we now know, is that the brain becomes used to a certain chemical, electrical balance. And sometimes that balance is maintained by a behavior that dislocates us from our Creator, from God, from the universe, from other people, and causes this tension inside of us that's not resolvable. What happens is that love comes along and says, you can trust me. You can love yourself. You can be in relationship. And when that idea appears, there is an aggravation. There is a rising up of these inner demons where we can see them. The evil becomes manifest, right? The disruption, the pain, the suffering becomes manifest. And we recognize that both of those parts that are in tension are in fact part of us, and we cannot drive them away. Rather, they need to be welcomed into the family that is our inner life, recognized as playing a role, and then finding their place so that they don't overwhelm us, so that they're not activated and we feel gripped by them. And that letting go is, in fact, recognizing and trusting yourself and God and the universe and other people to be in relationship, that you will be cared for. It's interesting that in the story, the demons, legion, say, cast us away. And we don't talk about it that way anymore, but there is, on a deeper level, I believe, the reality that there are powers of darkness, that there are evil spirits that have glommed onto these parts of us and made things to be in tension, that they are pricking us, that they are exciting that one little thing. C.S. Lewis describes this so well in the Screw Tape Letters. And so it looks like we are driving them away and they're no longer part of us, when in fact, there's that part of us, perhaps wounded or perhaps neglected or worried or anxious, that is now seen and heard and accepted. And what happens to the man is he has peace now. He's sane again, right? He's not tormented by this tension. And what's wonderful is he turns to Jesus and he says, "Come, let me follow you. Let me come with you as you get back in the boat to cross the sea." And Jesus says, "No, you go home and be with your family and show them what a securely attached person looks like." And we're told in the story that the man indeed does that. And I'm encouraged by this, that when I do what's necessary to resolve this point of tension and accept that I am loved and that I am loving and that I can trust the universe to be good and to do me good, that affects all of my life. There is a peace that overcomes my whole life, that I'm able now to resolve other issues that are going on inside of me. I see clearly the resolution to that other relatively small point. So again, I'm seeing that this power of the divine love, which is a good idea, that we see modeled somewhere, right? Or that comes to us, as all ideas do, simply appears on the shore of our life and invites us in. If we can, through, as Jesus modeled, practice a mindfulness practice and a remembering myself that I am in the flow of the divine providence, that I am loved, if I have that practice, that when this gets aggravated and excited in me, this tension, that I'm able to rise above it and stay present with it and see myself as being along the way, that this is the process of life. That little glimmer of hope is what will bring me back to the ground, back to the earth, back into sanity, and a presence that then is joyful and can experience life. Why? Because I now feel connected to my God, to other people, and the parts inside of me are connected and working together. The very next story in the Gospel of Mark, chapter 5, here is again Jesus being confronted by someone who's suffering. He crosses the sea again, and now he comes to the populated side near Capernaum, and he's walking through this great crowd. And it turns out that there's this woman who has been bleeding for many years, and she has not been able to get any better for 12 years. But she hears about Jesus. And so here's one of the key things. She has a faith or a belief that Jesus can heal her. But she doesn't feel worthy. She doesn't feel good enough. So she sneaks up on him. And unlike everybody else in the crowd who might be brushing up against Jesus, she reaches out and touches him on his robe with the intention of being healed. Jesus, being in the story the divine love present on earth, the Son of God, realizes that healing power has gone out of him. And so he turns around and he says, "Who touched my robe?" Of course, everybody around says, "What do you mean? The crowd's around me. How can you ask who touched me?" But he kept looking around, we're told. And then we're told that the frightened woman, she's still frightened, healed, but still frightened, trembling at the realization of what happened to her, came and fell to her knees in front of him and told him what she'd done. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you go in peace. Your suffering is over." Well, first off, the practicing Buddhists and Catholics amongst us will say that suffering isn't ever actually over. It's something that's ongoing. There's things we need to do to manage it or to be in charge of our lives such that we are not run by suffering, but the suffering is there. And the idea that I am at some point in my life going to wake up and have peace for the rest of my life is just not believable. And finally, this idea that our faith makes us well when there's plenty of true believers who are suffering. So this is an encouragement for me to listen if I'm taking this view that Jesus is modeling a person who's securely attached and the impact that they have, and a description of the inner process of my healing, of coming to a place of being securely attached. If that's the case, then what's happening here is an inner process. Okay, so back up for a minute here. I have not experienced the degree of suffering that bleeding woman did, except I had what's called cluster headaches, right? And they're painful, they're not migraines, but they are a headache and they are chronic. And they've been resolved. They've gone away. Now, I think that it was because of the things I did in my life, including mindfulness practice. So I have a sense of having been healed because I practiced a certain belief, a certain faith. And so I want to be an advocate for that, right? I want to tell people, look, there are medicines out there. There is behaviors, there's ways of being that will actually end that physical suffering. But like you, I've also experienced that deeper anguish that I don't believe I'm good enough. And that doesn't go away. There's plenty of us who have that chronic thought that I'm just not good enough. And it shows up in so many different ways. It bleeds us of our life, of our value, of our worth, of our energy. And we can get in moments of despair that we will never be good enough. In fact, I think the modern observation is that clinically depressed people's brains are so dysfunctional that it takes an outside influence to resolve it. There's some medicine and then some practice that restores the functioning of the brain so that a person can finally address this issue of not being good enough, right? The belief that I'm not good enough. And those who become addicted are maybe trying to escape the pain of this conviction that I'm just not good enough. And that belief has matured. There's lots of evidence that is created as I live that way. Surely people who complete suicide are experiencing this spiritual bleeding. The process of our healing, regardless of the depth of the suffering, is the same. There is a, at times, mysterious event that awakens the addicted, the dysfunctional brain to the idea that this suffering is not necessary, that there is, in fact, a love and a real connection that brings relief. And somehow that glimmer of hope comes. This is Jesus walking through a crowd. There's this one idea and all the crowd of ideas that just attracts me, and I want to go touch it. I just want to go touch it. Like I see someone who is self-confident and a good person, right? Who's self-confident and kind. I've had a couple of those in my life where I really admired how they could do their work. They could lead people, and yet they were not obnoxious, right? They weren't demanding. And I said, how do they do that? And that glimmer of hope gave me the message that maybe I do have goodness in me. Maybe I can be a conduit of love. Maybe I can connect to my spouse, to my friends, to my God, right? Maybe there is an end to that tension inside, which is actually causing the suffering. Do you remember a time that you met someone who was grieving and you gave them a hug, right? There was nothing you could say. There was nothing that would resolve their grief. You couldn't fix it. So you just gave them a hug. And then the person reported that they felt better. Something was restorative, the hug. In fact, science is telling us that a 30-second tight hug actually changes the chemistry of the brain. We are wired for this connection, to experience this connection. And that connection happens not cognitively, not by our own power, but by our being in the flow of love, being on the path, on the way, not being gripped, addicted to some practice, some behavior, some belief that we think is necessary, that we become dependent on. Remember a time that you felt strong in your life, or that you had an insight that you had that you know you didn't generate yourself. It came from somewhere, but made a difference in you or in some other person's life. Can you imagine that was the Spirit giving you this gift that encouraged you to be in action, to do that good thing, or that idea, that feeling that came over you that withheld you from making a mistake, right? Or maybe there was the time that through your mind passed an idea that enlightened you to have some confidence in some truth, and so in God and in other people. Oftentimes it's an ordeal. An example in my life was when someone got angry at me, and that led me to believe that I'm worthless, that I'm no good. And then it happened enough and I matured enough in it and I'd seen enough examples that I was able, and I had a mindfulness practice, and I was able to say, oh, that person is angry at me. I don't have to believe that I'm worthless just because they're angry at me. I had to learn early in my marriage that just because my wife was angry at me didn't mean she didn't love me, which is what I thought at first. She had to teach me. I look back on that and I think it was my commitment to marriage, right? That kept me there and kept me in her presence so that she could finally teach me by modeling it that being angry at someone doesn't mean you don't love them. And notice what Jesus does in this story and how he's, again, modeling a person who's securely attached. I have had the experience of someone coming along with a good idea and haranguing and harassing me about how bad and wrong my idea is. Jesus doesn't do that. His attention is caught, just like that idea pops up in our mind. And that idea, if it's a good one, if it's a healing one, doesn't accuse us of being worthless, doesn't harangue and harass us for sneaking up or for being 12 years in this malady. It doesn't do any of that. And so Jesus was able to see this sick woman and not blame her like the priests and the doctors had done, but instead offer her the healing power of his love and his encouragement, and giving her that good message that, yeah, you're healed. It's all good. Go in peace. That is a sign of a good idea that is actually healing us. And the kind of person that brings that idea to us, if it comes from another person, is not going to be because they argued with us or pointed out what was wrong with us or lorded over us or told us how much better we are than they are and that they should do what we do. So learn from the suffering woman. Remind yourself that you are wired to be connected, that there is a power in the universe. There is a flow of love that you can be a conduit of. Maybe not the divine love that actually heals people's broken bones or heals their mental distress, but it is a participation in the flow of life that brings that healing to the person. And I don't know if you've experienced, but I certainly have. When I've had that experience of healing, it just brings me to my knees. I am grateful. I am perhaps surprised, but I feel better. It's like after the headache is gone, when you feel so good. And that is because we acted on this vague, perhaps, or nascent belief that we're wired for connection, that God loves us, that we're lovable, and that we can love others, and that we can love ourselves. Indeed, we become securely attached. I pray this has supported your transformative life, whatever practice you have in your life. I want to thank Solomon Keel for his music, and I want to invite you to make a contribution to this work if you wish and are able through the PayPal link. And I invite you to continue to listen to the next episode. You be well.